Well, welcome back. We're on deck. We're going to do some logical reasoning today in Prep Test 82. So I'm looking at Prep Test 82, Section 3 in the digital format. And let's start with question number 16. Using the IRAC approach to the issue, which one of the following, if true, would most weaken the argument? So again, you want to be careful because you're talking about the word most modifying the word weakening, right? So let's see what we have here. We have the argument is that the prevailing view among historians is that medieval European peasants were deeply dedicated to religion. Again, you know when you're preparing, just stop and just take one sentence at a time, read textually. So I'm informed that the prevailing view among historians is that the peasants in medieval Europe were deeply dedicated to religion. Got it. Next sentence. But the record keepers in medieval Europe were members of the clergy. Okay, so the folks keeping the records may have skin in the game. Next. And those are two facts. So we're still building facts here. Next sentence. It should come as it should not surprise us that chroniclers who were professionally occupied with religion would exaggerate people's religious devotion. Okay, so again, we're informed that it should not come as a surprise, right? That the folks who were chronicling the history themselves were professionally occupied with religion and therefore might exaggerate the religious devotion of people. And the final sentence, so those are all given to us as facts. Thus, there is reason to doubt the prevailing view of the medieval peasants' piety. So the conclusion basically is you can't trust the people who were collecting the data. And to weaken this argument, you would want to establish that, well, maybe you can trust the people who were presenting this data. So that's where I'm going to look. Let's look at A here. Among the written records produced by the clergy in medieval Europe and currently available to historians are a number of documents detailing non-religious as well as religious activities of the peasants. Well, that does, I mean, to some degree, that seems to me that weakens the argument. It doesn't weaken it a whole lot. But yeah, you're saying that, they may have been prejudiced. They may have had a point of view that the clergy, but at least on some occasions, they were presenting information that was non-religious. Doesn't seem to weaken it very much, but okay, let me keep reading. B, many members of the clergy in medieval Europe spent more time among peasants than among people of any other social class. And that to me doesn't do anything to weaken or strengthen this argument. What do we have next on C? We have written records produced by clergy in medieval Europe very rarely portray merchants or nobles as being dedicated to religion. So, you might not, I mean, C absolutely weakens the argument. I'm going to keep reading. But, you might not jump at C because you're saying, well, wait a minute. This was about the peasants, right? And choice C is not mentioning the peasants. What choice C is saying is that when the clergy was describing these other classes, it actually described those classes as being averse to religion. So that does suggest to me that it would weaken the conclusion that we should dismiss what the clergy wrote on the premise that the clergy was prejudiced, because presumably then they would have written the same way about these other two groups. Okay, we'll keep reading, but C is the answer. D, historians cannot develop a reliable account of the religious attitudes held during any given historical period unless they have consulted all of the relevant surviving records from that period. That does nothing to weaken this argument. Who cares? And E, documents produced by clergy in medieval Europe contain detailed descriptions of participation by peasants and others in religious activities. It's not weakening it. So the answer to 16 is C. And again, you need to be careful when you're dealing with, most weaken, because, you could look at A and say, well, it's not a favorable fact, but it's also not a particularly harmful fact, whereas C most certainly is. So the answer to 16 is C for Caligula. 17, what do we have here? Which the issue, which one of the following principles are valid would most help justify the argument above? Okay, so think always principal issues where the answer is a principle, it's going to be a general term. All right. The argument that we're going to read is going to be a specific instance. So we're going to take this specific instance and look for the more general language, which governs it, and that should be in the answer choice. So let's see what we have here. Beads were used as currency for centuries. So if I would just, if I were just going there, beads would be the specific and currency would be the general. But okay, so beads are used for currency for centuries. But why beads? The striking fact about many objects that have been used as currency, there's the currency, right? Gold, silver, and feathers, who knew? To name a few, is that they were first used mainly and often solely as decorative objects. You just want to stop. There's a lot in that sentence. And this is descriptive. So we're given a fact. And the fact is that things that were things that were decorative became currency. So, we're told that there was a characteristic, and that characteristic here was if you were a decorative object, what is likely to happen to you later on, you're likely later on to be used as currency. So that's where I'm going here. And then the conclusion, thus, it is natural that beads, which were valued as objects of adornment, that's decorative, came to be used as currency. So the answer is not about beads, not about gold, it's not about silver, it's not about feathers, right? It's about things that were decorative initially that became currency. So sort of like one characteristic gave rise to a second characteristic. Okay, I got that. So get the answers here. A, the similarity between the secondary uses of two different objects can cause the primary use of one to be transferred to the other. And I mean, that's just horrible language. But no, this is not about, I mean, if you break that down, right, and you say the similarity between the secondary use of two different objects, so that would be the secondary use here would be currency, can cause the primary use, which would be decorative, to be transferred from one to the other. So, well, we'll just stop because that noise is just annoying.